Hi, can you hear me?
Good morning.
I can hear you. I couldn't hear Raidul, so I was messing with my sound. Oh, there, I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if Narsima turns out. How are you folks?
Yeah, it's okay. We had snow at Longmont yesterday. It's kind of in the morning it was sunny, and all of a sudden during the afternoon it become snowy.
In the afternoon, that's weird. I thought all the snow was in the morning.
No. But anyway, that's nice. Fine.
Hardly anything in Fort Collins.
Oh, okay.
Kartik?
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Good.
All right. You're gonna wait a bit and see if Narsima shows up. And I don't know if he I don't know who he sent the message to. So there's Christina. I don't know if he included Sheng Wei. I thought we'd agreed to send them to the whole team. But then I think we have fallen off or never started that. Let's see. Yeah, he just sent it to, I need to take a closer look at yeah, he just sent it to the 5 of us. So I don't know if Shang Wei will join. And I don't know if Narsima will join. But he wanted us to do an update meeting. Yeah, so we can do that, and it's being recorded, so he can watch it. And I think if we get to the end of that, one thing that we haven't really delved into Kartik's heat maps, we only saw the code, and we didn't talk too much about the implications or what to do with it.
Yeah, we can discuss that at the end if we have time, or even next
Yeah,
week.
Christina, we always make you last. Let's make you first, if you're ready.
Yeah, sounds good. So I actually wanted to, oh, if you can give me the permission to share the screen. Thank you. So I wanted to share a graph on the results, and I'd like to have your feedback if it's understandable, too big, too much in one. So last time I said that I would want to go more towards the prediction than actually interpreting the coefficients. So that's why I kind of don't want to put this big table with the coefficients in the main part of the paper. So this one shows the R squared values of the different models. And so these are all the variables, and they are kind of cumulatively added to the model. So the first one is only this variable, and then the next one is all the previous ones plus this one. So it's kind of built up. And the 4 columns are the 4 different samples we have: the metropolitan areas with only the owners, the national sample, and then the national sample only with the owners. And the variables are sorted by the buckets, kind of. So the first bunch of variables are the prior equipment, fuel prices, housing, social demographics, occupancy, climate, and the location. There are a couple of gaps they cannot be included because of the perfect correlation, essentially. So, or for the sample. So for the national sample, we don't know where houses are, so we cannot have the prices included, and of course not the location. And then with the location, that's the special case where we cannot include the fuel prices. So as I said, normally it's all cumulative, but then when we come to the locations, we need to exclude the prices from above because they correlate. And then I just marked the ones where R squared increases more than 0.01. That's kind of a threshold that I chose because that's not too many. And for the other ones, it's very incremental, the increase. And then I built some models only with those that have a larger effect on R squared. So those are the ones at the bottom. Is that kind of understandable?
This is a nice way of presenting it. Did you, how did you choose the order?
Yeah. So it's just according to the buckets, but I could also do the housing ones first and then do the prior equipment and so on. So that the result should be the same in terms of what impact the different variables have. Of course, if that comes later, the R squared would be higher for those because it's cumulative, but the increase, but the marked variables should still have a higher increase in the R squared. So that shouldn't make a difference. And I kind of chose to start with the prior equipment because that's where our hypothesis comes from. But then I'm kind of like with those ones, just selecting the variables that have a higher impact. I kind of want to get rid of the potential influence of the order. So just looking at what those can already predict.
You have cooling degree days?
No, only heating degree days.
You're not going to do that?
Because I think I could only include one of the two. Because they were correlated, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, maybe they'd be negatively correlated, but I think, and you're not seeing a huge difference, but I thought that Narasimha's other work was finding that air conditioning was a predictor or something like
Yeah,
that.
so central electric air conditioning is a variable in itself.
Yeah, okay, well, we can talk about that later. What do other people think of this?
So the yellow ones are the ones with the biggest change. Is that
Yes.
what it is? Okay. And can you remind me, how do you get the prices?
Yes, so oh yeah, then I wanted to show you another graph as well. So the prices are from the Office of Statistics of Labor or something. So they are actually by the metropolitan areas for the electricity and the gas prices. Only the oil price is by state. Yeah. And I mean, we have been discussing the effect of the price a couple of times. And I think, I mean, it's just a correlation that we have. We don't talk about causality. So there was just a high increase between 2017 and 2019. And for the gas and the electricity prices, they are just more flat, essentially. So I'm not too concerned about the price effect anymore. I think we can I wanted to discuss this with Narasima about the narrative, but I like how we kind of phrase this in the paper. But I'm more confident that it makes sense now.
Yeah, I don't know how to get my head around the jump in oil prices, but it sounds like you've talked about it a lot. So these are R squareds, they're not the direction of correlation or the influence, right?
Exactly.
So I assume you have some another presentation about that.
Yeah, so as I'm thinking of it, like how I think about it now is that I put that in the appendix only with the marginal effects and the coefficients. Yeah, to avoid too close discussion on the coefficients, which we statistically, technically cannot really do.
Do you mean you don't have the statistical power to do it?
No, just from this setup, like how, like the relations we know between the different variables and so on, we should not really interpret the coefficients.
We can, well, we could interpret them as positive or negative, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, can you show what they look like? I think
mean, yeah.
I think everybody's going to jump to the coefficients, so I think you should be really prepared to talk about that the limitation.
Yeah, so that basically hasn't changed from the Friday presentation I gave. I can show you the same graphs essentially that I had there. I
Well,
just wanted to have some feedback on this plot essentially to
Mm,
see if it's understandable, if it's too confusing, if there's too much in it. It's also like it's a page essentially. It's not like
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really nice. So we've spent most of the time having the top part of it shown. Can we focus on the bottom part for a little bit?
Yeah.
What does it mean that the MSAs go back down? Is that the effect of excluding the fuel price?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And so these should be, the MSA should all be treated as cumulative, except that some of the previous influences have been removed, so they started a lower R squared.
Yes. And I'm thinking of maybe I should actually include, because it's essentially the same variable. These are just dummy variables for the same thing, essentially. If it makes sense to include them one by one, I should probably just include all of them or exclude all of them and not one by one because it's the same variable. Yeah.
I see. Or some other way of presenting the, I mean, it looks like some of them are not, some of them don't have an influence and some do, right? And so there may be a better way to present that, like a box plot or something, I don't know. Because I did also try to draw conclusions about the stepwise, but if they're all the same variable, then that's not wise.
What do you mean
But
by
then if the,
box?
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Khalid.
I was gonna say because you have, for example, owners and renters, which are probably technically the same variable, but you have kind of
Yeah.
split them. So for sake of consistency, if you're doing it there, you should probably do it here as well, or not. So it depends on if you want to keep the reference level or not, right? So
Yeah, so these are all the dummies. So the reference level is already excluded.
exclude, yeah. So then you should probably just keep everything then if you're keeping it in the part, because even race, you have all the different races, even though they're technically split from the same variable, I'm guessing. So
Yeah, so yeah. As I was talking about it, I was like thinking, yeah, I should probably always include the same variable at once. So then it would be a couple of them at the same time. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about the bottom, the 5 at the bottom, the reduced models?
So for those, I kind of wanted to see what the variables that have a higher impact on the R squared can already explain. So only those. So now we are gone from the cumulative build up of the modeling. So the first one only includes the marked prior equipment and price variables. So those are all the yellow ones from above. And then I further kind of reduce the model or switch. So we can only include price or MSA variables. So I did a model with just those. And then only the prior equipment, then only the price and only the MSA. And I think that would help with the narratives, because if we say something like the prior equipment matters, it's not the biggest influence, but it does matter, then I think it supports that conclusion if we have a model with only the prior equipment. And those R squared are actually very high compared to the literature. So most of them are like around 0.1. And when we can say that just looking at the prior equipment is already above or around 0.1, yeah.
So the confounding between the price and the MSA, I'm not sure what to do with that. As like, how would I consider that as a modeler? Because it looks like price is really much more explanatory than MSA, but MSA has an influence. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think the price capture, because when we include the price, we cannot include the MSA variable. So I think the price captures some of the MSA effect, essentially, because it's a dummy, it's like a, it captures the MSA effect if we cannot include the MSAs, but the price. And more things than that, because the effect is higher than with the MSAs, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if I were, well, I think just looking at this, I'd say, well, I'm going to throw out MSA and just include price, and that'll get most of it. Would I be?
Yeah, but then the price
say that?
also includes MSA, so that can kind of show what part of the price is due to the location differences, right? That's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think you're saying that MSA has an influence beyond price, or you can't tell that from the data
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah. So some of the effect of the price captures the location effect, I would say. Yeah.
but MSAs do have an effect beyond price.
So when
that,
we include the MSA, we cannot include the price.
yeah,
So
so we
some
don't
of the
know.
MSA effect could also be the price effect, right? We don't know. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sure you're struggling to write the text about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so feedback on this diagram is what you want, right, Christina?
Yeah, because I think then, I mean, there must be some sort of table or graph that kind of puts all the variables out there. And I don't really want to go with the coefficients or the marginal effects. So I was thinking of that.
Can you explain the differences between the for example, race white and race change to white?
Yeah, so the different variables we include are basically the static value of that year, and then the change compared to the previous time period, essentially. So no matter what it was before, it changed to a white person.
In the house?
Yeah, the household head.
So is it tracking, sorry, is the longitudinal tracking the house or the occupant?
The house.
The house. Oh, wow. Somehow I missed that. Okay, everyone, pile in with your comments, and I think you're looking for like, does this speak to you? Is this readable?
Is it understandable? Yeah.
Yeah, and so even, especially if you're not accustomed to looking at things like this, please comment, because you might feel like you don't have experience. Most of the people who read this paper won't have experience, so your impressions are really useful.
Yeah, especially I was thinking of like the gaps. Is it clear that they are just not included and not that r squared is 0? Like, you know, that could be a confusion that, but I mean, there will be a caption that explains it, but I think it would be helpful if by just looking at it, it's also kind of clear.
You could probably gray it out, maybe.
Yeah. You mean,
Just those places. Yeah.
but what do you mean by gray out? Like,
Instead of having the white, maybe have stripes or
Oh.
something just to show that it's not
yeah,
considered.
yeah, that's maybe a good idea.
Yeah, I think for me, I think reading, the existing literature, I'm usually used to seeing, the plots that you showed previously with the line at 0 or 1, and it's this side, that side, and kind of interpreting stuff like that. So I think you should still have that, as you said, in the SI or somewhere, either in a figure form or a table form, along with the p-values and everything, because
Yeah,
I think that is what a lot of people would be expecting. So
yeah.
yeah, and I've not seen yet many papers where people are arguing for higher r-square values. I mean, it is probably ultimately what you want, but I think people are usually more concerned about which factors has the highest p-value or the strongest whatever thing. So
Yeah,
you just have to justify it somehow.
yeah. But if it's mostly about the prediction and not, yeah, so I feel like those, I agree that most commonly there's like either a huge table or some sort of graph looking at the coefficients and significance. But when it's more about the prediction, and I mean those papers mostly like actually interpret the coefficients, right? Like that's the point. So if we shouldn't do that, then I feel like we shouldn't have those graphs, because it draws the attention to those, and then we need to talk about them, of course. And there are not so many, I think there are a lot of papers that actually interpret the coefficients, although they cannot really do it. So they're kind of, yeah.
Christina,
Which we could also do, but yeah.
No, I know we talked about this before, but I would love to see your writing on that specific concept, right? Because what Kartik's saying is true. Usually get a table with a bunch of, P's and then double stars and single stars.
Yeah.
And if people are expecting that, then, and you don't address it, you're gonna have to,
Yeah,
you're
of course
gonna have
you
to
have to
deal with the reviewer. So I think that your development of the argument and sharing the text with the group to see if it becomes convincing, I think that would be
Yes.
super helpful too.
Yeah.
So I think there's two questions here, right? One is this a good method of presentation? And Christina's raised some issues about prior interpretation, and those have to be clearly explained and justified. And then there's Christina's question about if this is an okay way to present it, does the graph speak to people and is it understandable? Sarah, what do you think?
For the presentation, Christina, when I look at this presentation about that race, white or education, it's vague for me at the first glance that you consider a household, changes in the household for a building and or an area. It's a bit vague. You could at least change the variable name or something that shows you consider changes in a building rather an area. If I understood correctly that you want to historically consider the socio demographic information for buildings, yes?
Yeah, for the occupants of the buildings. Yeah, so the data is tracking the buildings and then gathering information on the occupants, but that might change. So the building, like a housing unit, stays the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I think
Maybe I
your,
can put it at the top, kind of somewhere here, what the N refers to.
or I think your labels are really nice and concise, Christina. Maybe a really strong caption where you have that change label up right up front. Considers both the status and change in status over the period. Raidul, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think you have mostly covered all the points. So it will fall significantly on how Christina will explain in the paper the assumptions that she had made. Again, I'm mostly exposed like seeing the correlation matrix, and to me, statistical model itself is a prediction type of modeling. Like the model with the significant variables and the marginal effect gives us an estimate of what variables is causing the changes and to what extent. But this is a nice way for representation, but it also falls on the author's responsibility to make those clear assumptions as much as possible. I think you will, if you do a good job on that, that will significantly improve your readability of the paper.
Yeah.
Also, would you have another prediction figure after this, or what would be the leading sort of, yeah?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. What would you think is the prediction figure? Because I wanted to do kind of the ROC curves, if you know that, like how
No,
basically
I'm not familiar.
the classification of like how the model correctly predicts if somebody switches to a heat pump or not. But I didn't find a way to do that with the sampling weights, like neither in R nor in Stata, because it's all only possible with frequency weights. And that's kind of an issue. So I was thinking of not doing it. Yeah, I think the sampling weights are really kind of the constraint of what you can do with the data. And doing it without the sampling weights also doesn't make sense because they are quite high. Yeah. Or treating them as frequency weights, that would be an option. But it would also alter the results. I don't know how far off it would be because, yeah. But I think it's better to not do it then.
Wait, sorry, could you describe what kind of plot you're trying to make?
Yeah, but that I cannot do because of the sampling weight and frequency.
Yeah,
weight.
sure. No,
Yeah.
but what does it look like? Like I'm not familiar.
So maybe I can show an example actually. I have it still open.
So I want to leave a little time for other people
Yeah,
to
sure.
report in. I wonder if this, I think the question of prediction is really important. And Christina, I hear you having a tension between being rigorous and sticking to accepted procedure and then
Yeah.
producing things that could be useful. And so then, you know, on the flip side, I'd say, well, heck, if you can't, if you're targeting your method to focus on prediction, but then you're not going to do a prediction, then I would start complaining, right? As a reader, like, well, you put yourself in a box and then you can't get out of the box.
Yeah, but isn't the R squared part, it's not exactly a prediction, but it kind of goes towards the prediction, right? Like what type of variables can explain
Oh, for
the
sure,
outcome.
for sure.
Yeah.
But then it's almost like you take a step out over the cliff and then you're just hanging there.
Yeah.
But that's probably maybe a deeper discussion either in the whole group meeting or in another modeling meeting where we just simply focus on this. So I'm going to flag that to come back to and give the other four of us 5 minutes apiece to say what we've been doing. And then I think we do have some open time on the horizon in both the modeling meetings and the group meetings. And so if it starts to look really rich, then I think we should just put those on the schedule for a whole period discussion.
Thank you all.
Okay, who's next? Sarah, would you like to speak next?
Yes. During past weeks, I work on the calibration of this building object we talked about previously, and because we have a difference in our estimates and RESTAG, and so I haven't yet find the reason for that difference of our energy demands estimates and RESTAG, but we decided to concurrently move forward to cost and also seeing the building object from a physical perspective and see what's the reason for that higher estimates, in fact. And about my collaboration with Dr. Carter on
Can you stop after you've delivered like one subject and then let people comment on that?
Yes.
So, and you may want to explain what you mean by calibration.
Oh, yes. For the building object, the RESTAG data set provide energy consumption based on the heating equipment efficiency and type of the fuel they use for different cases like heating or lighting. Or this is separately provided in the RESTAG. So we consider the basic case of the like electric furnace with the 100% efficiency to calculate the energy demand for heating. Based on the RESTAG, it provides an estimate, and also our building object calculate this based on the different method and using the internal and outdoor and indoor temperature and the housing characteristics. So the estimate that the building object provide is much higher than the estimate that we calculated based on that heating energy consumption of the RESTAG. This is the way that we used for calibrating the building object against the RESTAG, despite the difference in the method.
Yes,
And
I think we have a couple of candidates that we may need to fix in the building object that we identified last week.
yes, I can show you the estimates for better view.
But I think, yeah, while you're doing that, Sarah, I would say also one of the things that I am interested in is we're not sure how much building energy plays a role in decision making, right? Like,
Yes.
and I don't know if we can get that out of Christina's work. I think there's some physical reasons why go ahead and bring it up, Sarah. Why Sarah's estimate is much higher and we need to fix those, but then overall, we seem to predict greater than what's published in Restock by a factor of 2. Nevertheless, I'm not sure, I think it matters, but I don't think it may not be a dominant factor in the actual decision process, if that makes sense. And so I'd like to get back to Christina's work to see exactly how much, if we were wrong with the operating cost, like how much would that really matter in the decision? Does that make sense? Or if Redstock's wrong. Like, I thought this would be simple. It's not simple. Uh,
So if you want, I can share the calculation for a better view of the.
Yeah. And then I think we should go on after this. You probably don't need to talk about the work with Dr. Carter because it's not as much part of the modeling yet.
Yes.
So we'll bring that back to one of the group meetings, and I think we have a scheduled group meeting on that topic later this month or in April.
So for clarification of this table, we should only consider the columns after this green one, and the extreme values are those in yellow. First, the building object calculate the energy demands based on another unit, BTU, and we converted to the unit similar to Restock for comparison, and this is the estimates based on the Restock energy consumption, and we did some calculation for comparison per square feet of the building based on the area. And this is the ratio. As you can see, there is a high difference between these two estimates.
Yeah, so there's some that are way over predicted and there's some that are not as much, but they tend to be over. If you think Restock is exactly right, then they tend to be over predicted. And we don't know if it's right? We don't know what assumptions have been made. Furthermore, the assumptions we're making are more like the ones that contractors make when they size furnaces and make decisions about cost efficiency, right? So Restock does this whole building modeling, which includes internal gains and a whole bunch of other stuff. That is not what a contractor does. So we have to kind of dig into that a little more.
Yes, exactly. The contractor mostly consider the areas and housing characteristic like insulation and other thing existing in the building, not for a straightforward calculation of energy demand, because they consider if the estimate is higher, is better than the lower estimate and rank calculation for the equipment.
Anyway, we should probably go on to Raidul. And then Kartik, what I'd like to do is, I hope there's time for you. But I think we need to take one of our modeling meetings soon to delve into your heat maps and actually make decisions about how we're going to use them.
Yeah. So, Tammy, I had a follow-up question. Sorry if I misunderstood you. So, did you mention that it still remains to see if annual energy demand will play an important role in the decision-making process, something like that, or?
It does, it should, but this is sorry, it's getting loud here. I'm in a coffee shop. This is predicted energy demand, right?
Okay.
So people kind of, so the thing that we've been talking about as important is maybe a sort of present day total cost of capital and operation.
Mm-hmm.
That implies that you know what the operating cost is going to be. And so that's a predicted value.
Yeah, yeah.
But you don't really have an operating cost. You have what you think is going to be an operating cost. Now, I'm not saying that's unimportant. I'm just saying that if we're wrong by some amount, how
Okay,
much
okay.
how would that affect somebody's decision?
Mm. Okay, okay. Got your point. And I had another question for Zara. So last week you mentioned that NREL has released a new restock data set. Are you going to use that, or are we still using that previous data set for the calibration purpose?
I haven't decided, but the new data set using new like information from Rex, and they used in fact the latest version of the Rex.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. As for my update, Tammy and I finally agreed on a reasonable methodology to be included into our AVM model. So I can show you a screenshot of what we decided. So I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. The two-stage decision-making process. The first stage would be the equipment age that will trigger the decision-making process. Then we'll look into what would be the associated cost for each of those technological options. And then if we have this cost available to us, we'll take advantage of some of the available economic theory, like the risk aversion function that gives an estimate of how much, like the hypothesis is that higher income households are more likely to take a risk and adopt an expensive but energy efficient heating system, whereas lower income people does not have that leverage or comfortable economic status. So with all those assumptions hypothesized, we will be looking to implement it the ABM model. So last week Tammy and I had a more like a high level discussion. So last week I mostly went into this analytical formulation. How does the analytical formulation look like? What are some of the variables that we'll need? Whether these are already available to us? What extra information do I need to collect? So my expectation or goal is the next 2 weeks, within 2 weeks, fully operationalize it in the ABM model, so that currently we have a more like toy type ABM model, very randomized value assumption. We run the model and it gives us some value, but now we will like to implement this actual realistic assumption of human behavior process during this type of technological adoption. Then I'll come back to Zara and Kartik and Tammy, Christina again to see that if those assumptions will really correlate to what we have seen in the SES Fusion data or empirical data validation. So that's mostly my goal for the next 2 week. Getting back, I had taken a break from the coding and was focusing on the methodology part, but I feel that now I'll get back to the coding and actually operationalize these assumptions into the ABM model. I'll put this flowchart into Mural board later today, so that if anyone is interested can take a look and provide feedbacks accordingly.
And Ragul, I think it's worth having a group meeting with some of these decisions, because I think you've explained them to me over a period of weeks. But I think the rest of the team doesn't have that depth on them. And so you've got literature justification and so on, and contrasting some of these things with Look to the literature out there, I think will also be really super useful for the group.
Sure. Yeah, we can find a suitable time in Friday or Tuesday and pitch the idea to the whole team and have their feedbacks.
Yeah, let's get it on the schedule during your meeting. Okay, Kartik, you have 5 minutes and then I'll take the last 1 minute.
Okay, yeah, so I've spent most of my past few weeks sort of polishing up my story of, the broader well-being question and basic needs. And I think previously I'd showed results that kind of say, okay, if you're energy deprived, it does affect your quality of life and things like that. But a lot of the feedback I got was, well, so what? Like, why is this important? And I started digging through that a little more. And I think I found a narrative in terms of like who is affected most due to lack of these services. That sort of also gets into the heterogeneity part. So how do you slice the population to see, who is kind of hurt the most when they're deprived of, energy services, for example. So that's kind of the direction I've taken. And yeah, hopefully in a few weeks, I'll have my story kind of set with all the figures and stuff that I want to show you. So yeah, that's where I am at. Well, apart from, developing the data set and the heat map and everything else. So yeah, that's kind of my update.
Kartik, if I may ask a question, so do you have any idea or like in your research, like, okay, if people make changes in their heating system, whether energy efficient or not, these are the variables that will be affected or will see significant changes in terms of well-being or something like that.
Well, change, I cannot talk about change because it's like a cross-sectional data set.
Mm.
So change is difficult, well, impossible,
Mhm.
unless we do like more directed studies. But in terms of which variables affect lack of services or just energy poverty, I can tell you that, because when I run a regression, pretty much, throw the kitchen sink at it in terms of, well,
Yeah.
everything that's in the data set, and then I could tell you which variables are more, contributing than others. So
Okay. I have an idea. I'll first run it with Tammy and get back to you later.
okay.
I think we both have some ideas on this topic. And I think one of the challenges we faced is this divide between causality and proof of causality and statistics. And I mean, even Christina with her great longitudinal data set is struggling with it, right? And so I think this is the heart of some of the problems is we have these very causal models that like the ABM where everything has to be causal. Then we have statistics, and then there's a huge gulf in between. And I don't know how to overcome that because, but I think we need to make some proposals, because if we don't, we're probably going to have to make some leaps about causality that we can't prove. But that produces the outcome that we see in the statistics. And I think that's a big challenge, right? And then it will get shot down for not having evidence. And yet the alternative is not to include some of the things that appear to be related. So I think that gap is one I'm really interested in. I'm afraid of it because I don't know how to deal with it in a rigorous manner. But it's one that we need to acknowledge.
Yeah, I think the purists will say, well, you need a mechanism, or you need to state a mechanism or hypothesis and then develop a study that'll go and test it. But we cannot do that because, yeah, but they'll have to rely into statistical methods like, propensity score matching or whatever, just more robust causal inference mechanisms. But that's the difference I've seen in literature as well. So
Well, and this is a thing that I hope I can write into Narasimha's review, is just acknowledging this gap that there's like two sides of a gulf, and there's a little bit of a bridge built over the edges, and then there's a big gap in between. And I don't know how to say that, but I'm sure there may not be a rigorous way to attack it right now, but I think there must be a way to discuss it at least. So that's what I've tasked myself with for Narasimha's review. I'm not contributing a lot, but I would really like to highlight that issue.
And yeah, I'll share a few references with the group, Tammy, but I've seen some of the social psychologists sort of try to bridge that gap, saying that, yeah, if all these correlations, like what do they mean if you're always putting a line in there saying that we don't say this, but then what are you trying to say? So yeah, there's some discussion on
That'd be
that.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I have a very short update that I just keep kicking my model a little bit farther. And I've now been, I wish Xiangwei was here because I'm now producing and writing out age distributions just based on retirement rates. So I start the equipment in the year when the house was built. It's just really crude. And then like run it forward, let them retire probabilistically, and that produces an age distribution. But I would like something to compare it with. So yeah, so I'll try to get with Xiangwei and see what he has for age distribution of different kinds of equipment. And I suspect it's going to be really hard to calibrate because you might get an age distribution of certain kinds of equipment, but then it's going to be influenced by the age of the home, because of course, a home that's just built is going to have a new equipment. And so the more, as usual, the more you disaggregate, the less data you have to compare your disaggregated data with. Anyway, that's where I am. Okay, well, it was really quiet when I got here. I had to take my car in this morning, and so I only got halfway home before needing to start the call. But now it's really noisy, so I hope it's not disturbing you. Okay, well, thanks everyone for the updates. I'm gonna pinpoint some of you for making presentations. I'll write up maybe a summary centered around the 5 of us in Narasimha first of what I think might be useful to have as discussion periods. And then you can all add to it, please. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.